Hi everyone, this is Matt Curfman with the September edition of Matt's Minutes from Richmond Brothers. Hope you all had a great month. What I thought I would title this one for the month of September is Perspective. We've just kind of wound down the third quarter of the year, which ended Friday, September 28th. And so thought it might be a good time to look at year-to-date and kind of the overall economic perspective, and then tie that into when we look at our portfolios, how should we look at that? So as of September 30th, if you looked at the S&P 500, the price return, and then if you looked at the aggregate core bond index, which would be AGG, and use those as benchmarks, if you had a portfolio with a mix of that, many of you that work with us are retired or near retired, and so it's very, very few of you who have all of your money in the market. And so we keep seeing headlines where the market, the Dow, the S&P are hitting near highs, but remember, from our seminar recently, we're just coming up to the highs that we reached in January and just slightly moving ahead of those. It's taken since January 26th to get to this point. So if you, for example, had a 40-60 stock bond portfolio, so 40% in stock and 60% in bonds, and you use those two benchmarks that I just mentioned, through September 30th, your actual return would be 1.51%. So again, that seems odd, but it's because what's happening is the bond market has actually lost money as the Fed keeps raising rates, and so the more conservative you are, the harder it's actually been to make returns this year. Take that example one step further, and if you had a 30-70, 30% stock, 70% conservative or bonds, that portfolio has made 0.26% this year. And so again, just want to have some perspective to that as far as what we're looking at, what expectations are. If you look at the third quarter of the year and you isolate the S&P 500 against the broad market, all the stocks that are out there, basically almost a full 70% of all stocks that are out there underperformed the S&P 500, and half of that number, so if it was 70, half is 35% of those, actually fell 5% or more during that same quarter. And so again, we talked a little bit about this where you might start to see some more broad-based fund exposure between the S&P 500, also potentially with the NASDAQ 100, the QQQ Trust, which focuses on the mega tech companies. That's why we're starting to have some shifts in that direction. So I wanted to give you that perspective. When you look at overall policy and is the economy still growing, you know, the main themes this year are tax reform, deregulation, so red tape is being removed from a lot of industries, in healthcare and science and biotech, that's a good example. We're paying attention to where we're spending money, consumer spending is up, and then also a lot of talk on tariffs. So those are really the four main themes you're seeing. And so GDP, gross domestic product, the results of all of these policies. We've had GDP in the second quarter of around 4.2%. Third quarter numbers haven't been released, but projections suggest that it'll be between 4 and 4.5%. These are double some of the GDP rates that we've seen over the last decade. So whether we like them or not, it seems that some of these policies in the near term are working to continue economic growth. So what that tells us is the economy is still expanding, and therefore we don't need to necessarily make decisions to remove stock or lower your stock exposure yet. We have kind of put our crystal ball out to all of you that we think probably by 2020 we think recession could be coming, and so we want to take advantage through the rest of 18 and 19 despite what volatility could be out there. So with that in mind, if you have any questions on your specifics, again, this is a broad-based Matt's Minutes, and so I can't talk specifically to individual accounts, but contact us at questions@richmondbrothers.com, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. A couple of events coming up in the month of October. October 4th to October 9th in downtown Jackson. You may have seen a lot of social media on Bright Walls Festival, and there's 14 artists from all over the world coming to Jackson and painting murals on the sides of buildings. Richmond Brothers has been lucky enough to be a sponsor of one of the walls, and the wall that we are sponsoring will be on the side of the Pedal and Tour building downtown, so we're very excited to go check that out over the next week. And then we also have, if you're near 65 and having to turn on Medicare, we have a seminar on Wednesday, October 17th over at the Holiday Inn of Jackson. It is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. and it's put on by a volunteer client of ours who volunteers at the Department on Aging in Jackson, which is a tremendous free resource to look at different Medicare benefits. So check that out, and again, if you would like to attend any of those events, Medicare we would need to know in advance, and then the Bright Walls is a 4 or 5 day festival in all of downtown Jackson. So check it out online and we'll share some information. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate our relationship with you and having the opportunity to serve you, and we will see you next month.